This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, and thank you for attending today's webinar on how to secure your organization from the latest cyber threats. My name is Chuck Zalanis, and I'm with Heartland. I've been with Heartland for 18 years, dealing with food and beverage wholesalers around the country. Before that, I was a beer wholesaler for 20 years. But enough about me. Today, I want to talk to you about Heartland and how we're very excited about partnering with Arctic Wolf to bring a best-in-class service offering to our customers. We spent a number of months considering different organizations in the security space to partner with. We found that the SOC as a service offering from Arctic Wolf provides a great value for our customers regardless of their size. This is because the service will scale with the needs of our customers, so it'll always be right-sized. It seems that every one of our customers considers cybersecurity to be a top concern and focus for 2019 and beyond, especially with the frequency of the cyber crimes and ransomware in the recent news cycles. Before we dive into this presentation, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items that will answer all the questions at the end, and please mute your microphones. Finally, we plan on recording this and we'll share with all our registered people the webinar. Please feel free to share it with your friends and colleagues. Today, you'll hear from our partner, Thomas Blade. Thomas is a pre-sale engineer at Arctic Wolf Networks. As a pre-sale engineer, Thomas is responsible for guiding prospects through the technical sales process and communicating the technical value of Arctic Wolf's solution. Thomas has been in the SaaS field for over 10 years, selling solutions from Google, Chrome, and Okta. He brings a unique systems administrator view to the table, having served in several roles within information technology. In his free time, Thomas hosts several podcasts in the technology and entertainment categories. With that, I'll hand it over to Thomas.
Hey, thanks, Chuck. Thanks, everyone, for attending here today. Again, my name is Thomas, and I am a pre-sales engineer here with Arctic Wolf. Today, we're going to be talking about the current security landscape and the threats that pose businesses. We'll discuss an introduction to SOC, or Security Operations Center, take a look at how Arctic Wolf puts a spin on that with SOC as a service, swap a few war stories, and take a few questions. Again, if you have questions, please feel free to use the GoToMeeting chat box on your screen. Go ahead and type those, and we will get to those here at the end of our session. So let's look at the security landscape as it is today. Now, we all know we obviously live in a connected world, and over the last 50 years, we have gone from 23 secure military systems up to an estimated 50 billion connected devices by the end of this year. Now, what does that mean from a security perspective? Well, 60% of small companies that suffer cyber attacks are out of business within 6 months, $17.2 million settlements, and more and more and more and more. So when we see all these different attacks and we see all these different news stories, what does that mean to us? Before we dig in, let's talk about one of those particular cases. Everyone here is probably familiar with the Arizona Tea Company. Maybe you weren't aware that they were crippled by a ransomware attack that affected their desktops and servers across the entire organization. It started with a malware attachment known as iEncrypt. It spread to all of their workstations and servers, and employees were told to leave their computers off, no exceptions, and those machines stayed off for over 2 weeks. During their investigation, it was determined that This was caused largely due to out-of-date back-end Windows servers. And when they tried to recover their data, they determined that they also had misconfigured backup systems. So this is when they brought in outside assistance who determined that there was no or little to no perimeter or endpoint defenses. Sure, they may have had a firewall, but when a particular threat is already inside their network, the firewall is not going to have much value at that point. Now, Arizona T is a private company, but it was estimated that the recovery costs were over $1 million. By the way, a security operations center, just like Arctic Wolf, would have detected this at the first point when that initial malware attachment was received. And just again, they were in the environment for just over a month prior to detection, and their services were down for nearly 2 weeks. So let's take a look at some interesting insights. This is from a data breach investigation conducted by Verizon. 71% of breaches are financially motivated. This is where data is encrypted and then companies or users are held at ransom to get their data back. 39% of breaches were organized criminal groups at the helm. And lastly, one of the most interesting details, 43% of breaches involved small business victims. Cyber criminals have determined that small business victims are very lucrative targets to go after. This is because it is unlikely that they have the proper security and perimeter defenses in place to prevent these types of breaches. And also, as we noted earlier, they are very motivated to pay that ransom. Now, there are a number of attacks that circumvent prevention tools, that circumvent firewalls, or even endpoint protection software. Everyone is probably familiar with phishing, the idea to get someone to click on a link or give them credentials via social engineering or other types of attacks, usually over email, often going undetected. This can result in ransomware or other zero-day vulnerabilities, where organizations are forced to pay to get their data back or restore. Now, we know from the Arizona T case that restoration was not possible due to misconfigured backups, so it's very likely that they were forced to pay that ransom. And then lastly, one of the biggest threats is the human error or insider threat. This could be misconfigurations in systems or firewalls, disgruntled employees who then conduct things like data exfiltration. Now, why is it important to focus on detection and response? Well, the mean time to identify malicious and criminal attacks inside of a network is 214 days. Another 77 days on top of that to contain those attacks. So we all know about the Marriott Starwood incident where the hotel chain was breached. Those attackers happened to be inside that organization for nearly 4 years. It wasn't until an acquisition where due diligence was done and these attacks were discovered. So again, this is why it's so important to focus on detection and response. Not only locating this threat, but how do we handle it and what processes do we have in place to handle it accordingly. So at this point, we're going to talk about what a Security Operations Center is and what it can do to help and prevent these types of attacks. So looking here at a chart of the evolution of security, I want everyone on the webinar today to sort of think about where they and their companies are in this chart. Most of us have basic security, passwords, patch management, hopefully strong backups. And we probably all have firewalls and spam filters in place, as well as things like endpoint protection or DLP solutions. But a lot of organizations want to get to that next level, that detection and that response level. Being able to look at their security posture holistically, aggregate logs, correlate that data, apply threat intelligence from both artificial intelligence and human interaction, and again, be able to detect incidents and respond accordingly. Now, why is it so hard for organizations to get to that next layer? Well, for one, there's too much noise. When you start to layer in all of these different security products, all the different logs and alerts, all the compliance and regulations and vendors involved, it gets to be too much. A lot of organizations start to suspend alerts, turn notifications off, and really miss out on the viable or important information that comes out of those alerts and the notifications. The second challenge that organizations face trying to get to that next level of security is there's too much of a security skill shortage. Finding security talent and retaining them is very difficult and sometimes impossible. They're expensive resources, and there are just far too few to go around at times. Now, if an organization wants to build their own SOC, their own security operations center, let's take a look at some of the components that go into that. Now, of course, there's technology. We need to have something like a SIM. We need to have IDS at all of our egress points. We need to capture logs. We need to scan for vulnerability data. We need the threat intelligence feeds to know what we're looking at. And we need workflows in place to help us go through this type of information and logging data. We obviously need people. If we want to run that SOC 24/7, we're going to need a number of different operators and analysts. We need managers, and we need R&D. We need people that are there to focus on the platform, continually upgrade, and be able to respond to new threats. And then finally, we need processes. Most importantly, we need processes so that we know how to find threats. We know what to do when we find those threats. And we need to know how to conduct triage and forensics so we can act as quick as possible. And by the way, if you aren't already able to determine from this slide, this is what has gone into the CyberSOC that Arctic Wolf has built. Now, if you want to go ahead and build a SOC yourself, you can certainly go at it. However, thanks to a Frost & Sullivan Total Cost of Ownership report, we have learned that for small to medium businesses, it can sometimes be up to 7 to 8 times as expensive to build out that SOC as opposed to using something like an Arctic Wolf CyberSOC over a period of 3 years. Now, taking the cost and the time and the technology and the security staff, putting that aside for a moment, we also want to look at compliances for all the major verticals. These days, everyone is subject to some sort of regulation, whether it be in the financial services or the healthcare industry, or like a lot of folks on today's webinar, the retail and PCI space. With monitoring from Arctic Wolf, reporting is available to prove that you are constantly being monitored for configuration changes to your platform, intrusion detection and response, proper vulnerability scanning, and most importantly, monitoring systems that store personal identifiable information or primary account number type of data. So, how do we deliver on this? How does Arctic Wolf's SOC as a service solve for all of these different items that we've covered today? Arctic Wolf has 2 offerings today, 2 components that we're going to go over. The first on the left-hand side is the managed risk offering. This is all about identifying vulnerabilities within your networks or on your endpoints, trying to prevent these known attacks before they occur, ideally by reducing or at least mitigating that attack surface. Additionally, Arctic Wolf has an offering known as Managed Detection and Response. Again, this is all about detecting attacks during or after they occur. All these products and solutions are built around the NIST framework, and as you can see, it's a constant journey, it's a constant evolution. In addition to the technology and to those offerings, Arctic Wolf has included a Concierge Security Team, or CST. Now, these are named security experts, and they are available to you 8 to 5 within your time zone, and they operate on an emergency 5-minute response. I say named security experts, and that's really important to note that these are folks that you get to know on a personal level. You have contact information to reach out to them directly, and they really become extensions of your team from a security standpoint. So earlier, when I mentioned the challenges that organizations face to get to that next level, security talent was the biggest one, or one of the biggest ones. And Arctic Wolf solves for that with the Concierge Security Team. They learn your business, they learn and understand your network, and build a customized service for you, not only serving as an escalation point, but also providing forensics, incident response, insights, and advice. You'll meet with them quarterly or monthly to discuss any sort of gaps in your overall security posture, as well as provide advice or insights into what is on the security landscape. The Arctic Wolf Managed Detection and Response offering includes several key elements, the first being network monitoring. This is going to be achieved using a physical appliance deployed at each egress point to the internet within your environment. It'll serve as a managed intrusion detection system, allowing us to do things like capture flow data, network monitoring, and log data as well. This device is an aggregation point and correlation point for all the log data within your environment, including things like firewall logs, server logs, Active Directory logs, and so on. All of the collected data is going to be run through multiple threat intelligence feeds, looking for potential indications of compromise. Additionally, the Arctic Wolf Managed Detection and Response offering includes cloud monitoring for both infrastructure and software as a service. This will include things like Amazon Web Services, the Azure platform, Office 365, G Suite, and others, allowing us to watch for anomalies for admin behavior or end user behavior. Additionally, an endpoint agent is bundled in, allowing us to gather asset data and perform EDR light type of activities, such as monitoring the process table for out-of-band or rogue processes, and perform lightweight file integrity monitoring to ensure that key system files are not being manipulated by unauthorized parties. And then finally, as discussed earlier, not only are we providing compliance reporting, but we're also providing audit support. Your Concierge Security Team is more than happy to join you on a call with your auditors to ensure that everything that you need from us to check the boxes in the good column are being done. Pivoting now to the other component, the Arctic Wolf Managed Risk offering. Again, this is all about detecting vulnerabilities or attacks before they occur, and it's done with 3 key elements: an external vulnerability assessment, an internal vulnerability assessment, and a host-based vulnerability assessment. The external vulnerability assessment is focusing on what we can do from an external perspective. Using an Arctic Wolf hosted scanner, we'll scan your IP address ranges and host names out on the internet to ensure that there are no open ports or publicly accessible services running known vulnerabilities. The internal vulnerability assessment is going to be accomplished using a scanning appliance, either physical or virtual, within your network to scan all the hosts to ensure that there are no known vulnerabilities. And then finally, the managed risk host-based vulnerability assessment is going to be using the Arctic Wolf agent to scan for vulnerabilities across either Windows, servers, desktops, or Mac devices, looking for hardware or software vulnerabilities. With the managed risk offering, we're able to perform several key elements. Asset identification, being able to not only understand what is a desktop or a server, but also working together with you to further understand what is an internal server, what is a customer-facing server, and what elements might contain key data such as PCI information. With that asset identification, we can then perform a comprehensive risk assessment and provide you with a recommendation and write-up that explains not only the vulnerabilities we found, but helping you understand where to focus your time and effort. For instance, a server with a particular vulnerability that is on your dev side is far less important for remediation than something on your publicly accessible side. Additionally, we provide a monthly risk review with your concierge security team to help you make sense of the vulnerabilities found and help you understand what remediation efforts are necessary. Our 24/7 monitoring service will create incidents whenever we detect critical vulnerabilities within your organization or within your network. And then finally, we will continue to fine-tune and configure our monitoring services to ensure that we're always looking for the latest vulnerabilities and scanning any new hosts as they appear on the network. All right, a quick snapshot here of the architecture, just so we all understand how all of this kind of works together. So Arctic Wolf will be using several elements of telemetry. That's going to be our physical sensor or scanner for the two offerings, the Arctic Wolf agent, and a variety of cloud connectors. All of the data that's gathered from any of the elements that you see on the screen here are all going to flow into the Arctic Wolf CyberSoc. That CyberSoc operates on a 24/7, 365 monitoring. The team that sits there is very interrupt-driven and is always available for picking up on any alerts, doing investigation, and escalation to either you or to the concierge security team. All right. So thanks everyone for kind of going through that with me. I want to take a few moments to share a few war stories with you, and then we'll take a few moments for questions. Now, I hope no one on the call has seen this already or has experienced this themselves, but if you remember the story earlier about the Arizona Tea Company, this is pretty close to what they saw when they walked into work that day. All network services are down. Do not turn on your computers. So let's take a look at a specific incident here, a specific war story. This was a phishing attack. I think we're all familiar with those, as I mentioned earlier. This was a luxury cruise line. And what happened was the CEO's laptop was infected after clicking a malicious link inside of a phishing email. From there, a mass BCC email was sent from the CEO's laptop to all employees. Each one of those employees who clicked on that unsuspecting link or attachment were then infected as well with a keylogger and other malware from a malicious website. This allowed the hackers to harvest employee credentials. Now, Arctic Wolf and their concierge security teams were able to identify a pattern that emerged from this particular threat and alerted the IT teams of that particular customer of this malicious website. The customer was able to act quickly by blocking that malicious website and warning employees. Another one of my favorite war stories here is known as the MFA fail. Now, we all know MFA or 2FA is multi-factor authentication. And don't get me wrong, having multi-factor authentication is very important. The idea of having something you know and something you have in order to log into high accounts can be really important. And if we look at the screenshot on the right hand of the screen here, we see that on a mobile phone, a user is being asked to approve or deny a particular login. And that's great. But what happens when an international retailer and a CFO gets targeted and continually gets prompted for MFA requests? Well, that particular CFO got tired of all those alerts and finally hit the approve button. Once that approve button was clicked, the hacker was logged into the user's account and was able to monitor communications amongst that CFO and other organizational members to understand the routine of money transfers between business units, how much money they could ask for, and how to get it. Now, again, MFA is subject to human error. It is very important to know that where your requests are coming from when you get a multi-factor authentication, and it's very important to know how to see if they are fake or not. All right, so we're going to go ahead and take a few questions here, and maybe we'll check with the moderators to see if there are any questions thus far.
Hey, thanks, Thomas. It looks like we do have some time for a few questions. And what I want to do is read through a couple that have been submitted. If my company is hit with ransomware or another attack, how would Arctic Wolf respond?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And thanks to the 24/7 monitoring that's accomplished with the Arctic Wolf CyberSoc and the key elements that we have in place, that type of ransomware attack is really quickly identified, and we're able to notify a customer rather quickly of that particular threat, allowing them to contain it immediately or close to immediately as possible.
That sounds good. Second question, I have a firewall set up and it seems to work well. Why is that not enough? And what's the difference?
Sure. Yeah, so if you recall the story about the Arizona Tea Company that we shared at the beginning of the presentation, they had a firewall, right? They were blocking attackers from coming in. They were blocking people from brute forcing passwords into their VPNs or their remote desktop. But effectively, when a user downloaded a malicious attachment, the firewall didn't really have anything to do about it. The particular file was already in an email and was already in the network. So once that started, the firewall was really no assistance at that point.
All right. So the time factor becomes an issue. How long that it's back there?
Yeah, absolutely. That time to detect and time to remediate is key. And when someone like Arctic Wolf is involved and we're able to detect those attacks as soon as they occur, we can get that time to detect and time to remediate down as slim as possible.
Okay. Now, another question. How do you monitor applications like Office 365, and what types of cloud services and applications do you monitor?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm going to actually skip back to that slide I had earlier about the cloud connectors inside of our architecture. And when we monitor services like 365, we're going to use an API connection from the Arctic Wolf CyberSoc directly to Office 365 in this case. And we're going to monitor the same event data that a user could see if they logged into their Office 365 admin portal. But we're going to go a little bit further, and we're going to monitor for specific indications of compromise or types of stateful rules that we want to be able to watch for. And this could be things like 10 failed logins and then 1 successful login, or a login from an IP address that relates to a geo that your organization doesn't do business in. So looking for those types of elements is what's going to allow us to go further than just simply scanning those log files. Other services that we're going to monitor from a cloud perspective would include things like G Suite or Salesforce or Box, and we're largely looking for some of the similar types of behaviors. And then on the Azure or Amazon Web Services sides of the house, we're going to be monitoring for things like changes to security groups or instances being manipulated or deleted, as well as things just like strange login behavior that's occurring on those platforms as well.
Well, that sounds great. I think the last part is how they can learn more, and I can answer that. I mean, you can contact me, Chuck Zalanis, at Heartland. My number is 866-708-7225, or email me, Chuck at heartland-usa.com. And again, I want to thank Thomas and Arctic Wolf for putting on this presentation for all our customers. And again, our hope is that we keep you secure from the latest cyber threats. And again, thank you, Thomas, for all your help.
You bet, Chuck. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.